Now we know the real reason why William and Kate are taking their children on an Australian tour this year in the 12-week holidays, because Harry and Meghan are doing an Australian tour mid-April this year. So Harry and Meghan had planned their Australian tour last year, I'd say around the June-July marker, and that gave the royal family plenty of time to set one up for the Wales' family, because they thought, like, if Harry and Meghan go, it's going to be amazing. So they had to get one set up for William and Kate, but Harry and Meghan did theirs first. And obviously when the palace found out, they got things rolling and said, right, we've got to get this lot out to Australia as well. Now you've got to remember, Meghan did humanitarian tours before she'd even met Harry. Okay, just look them up. She went to numerous tours before she'd even met Harry. So all this, oh, she's only doing it to make herself look good. She was doing it before she'd even met Harry. So how can you say that? And remember, Harry and Meghan's Australian tour in mid-April isn't a royal tour. It's a humanitarian and philanthropic tour. And it's a completely different tour to what the Waleses are going to do. But someone else said, now I understand why these lot are going, because of Harry and Meghan. Everything Harry and Meghan do, these copycats have to follow, and they have to copy. And as I said in my other video, that this one's got all his corrupt and bent people in the UK, and the ones in Australia, they're going to be out there heckling obscene and shocking phrases, and God knows what they're going to say and blurt out into the public when Harry and Meghan are walking about Melbourne and Sydney. I don't think William should be king. I don't think he has any right to call the shots and do such a vicious attack on the Sussexes just because he's jealous that he doesn't get the media attention like they do. And as I said in my other video, how they'll protect William just because he's going to be the future king. And that in January 2020, William got his people to put Harry's name on a statement that said, no, William never bullied Harry and Meghan out of the institution, because look, Harry signed the statement, he didn't. And Harry was really angry that William and his people they'd actually scammed it. They'd literally just put his name on there without any consent from Harry. And someone said, this is the first tour that they're going to do, William and Kate, but they're only doing it because of Harry and Meghan. Someone said that if Harry and Meghan weren't going on a tour this mid-April, these two wouldn't be doing it. And this is going to be the first tour since Kate's supposed cancer diagnosis. But it just shows you that as soon as Harry and Meghan are out the door working, making a difference, these lot jump out of bed and they have to follow and copy, because they're so intimidated that these two are just so iconic and powerful. But I don't think it's right that the palace get to know when and where Harry and Meghan are going. They don't know what activities and engagements they're going to carry out, but all the palace know at the moment is the tour is in mid-April and they're going to Sydney and Melbourne. That's as far as much as the palace know at the moment. But once they start getting to know what engagements and activities they're doing, you can bet anything that these lot will have to carry out the exact same engagements. Because remember, on Harry and Meghan's tour to Jordan, 2-day tour to Jordan, because the palace knew what activities they were going to be doing, going to a Syrian refugee camp, arts and crafts of Syrian children, they got William and Kate to do the exact same activity because they had warning, they had full knowledge of what they were going to be doing that day. But it's sad that they literally have to mimic and imitate Harry and Meghan. So everyone that says, oh yes, William and Kate, they organised the Australian tour first. They didn't. It was Harry and Meghan, okay? It was arranged last June to July. So everyone that said, oh, they've only organised it this year. How can you organise a tour to Australia in the space of like 2 months? That's not possible, guys. So everyone that says, oh yes, William and Kate announced that they were going to Australia first and then Harry and Meghan have copied, I'm afraid it's the other way around, because the palace knew about Harry and Meghan's Australia tour back last year in June 2025. So let's cut all the threats and accusations that these ones are the copycats. They're not. This family are the copycats. They're literally going to study that Australian tour and everything Harry and Meghan do, activities wise, where they go, how they engage with people, they will study that and they will get these two to literally imitate and recreate what Harry and Meghan did on their tour, basically. So if we see William wearing the same outfit as Harry, we'll see probably Kate in the same outfit as Meghan. It's just going to be a copycat, but I find it sickening that it's literally going to be a replica of Harry and Meghan's Australia tour. Not the media attention, but they're literally just going to mimic everything that these two are going to do in mid-April. So they'll just say whatever Harry and Meghan say when they get to Australia. They'll just write that down and say, look, you've got to say this, you've got to sound exactly like your brother and sister-in-law. But I think it's disgusting that they literally have to mimic and imitate exactly everything that Harry and Meghan do. The media, the press, the journalists, they won't talk about it. I think it's sad that the palace only protect William because he's going to be the future queen.
Grab your tea or coffee, because today we need to talk about something that is starting to look a little like the royal version of copying a classmate's homework 5 minutes before the teacher walks into the room. The situation unfolding right now in the royal conversation has people raising eyebrows, asking questions, and once again debating the influence of Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex on the global stage. Reports have been circulating that Harry and Meghan are planning a humanitarian and philanthropic visit to Australia in mid-April. Now, this isn't expected to be a formal state visit or a traditional royal tour filled with tiaras, palace balconies and carefully choreographed photo opportunities. Instead, it reflects the approach the Sussexes have embraced since stepping away from official royal duties. Independent humanitarian work that focuses on communities, grassroots organisations and real conversations with real people. And that's where things start getting interesting. According to several discussions circulating among commentators and online observers, planning for this visit reportedly began months ago, sometime around the middle of last year. That timeline matters because international humanitarian trips don't just appear overnight. They require extensive coordination with charities, community leaders, non-profit organisations and local partners. Anyone who has ever organised even a small event knows how much preparation it takes. Now imagine planning a global visit involving multiple organisations and public attention. But then something curious happened. Around the same time the rumoured Sussex trip began gaining attention, news started appearing about another possible Australian visit involving Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Suddenly, two high-profile royal couples connected to the same country within a similar news cycle had people wondering if there might be more to the timing than coincidence. Now, let's pause for a moment and be fair. Australia is a massive country and one of the most prominent nations within the Commonwealth. It's not unusual for public figures or royal family members to visit during the same year. Major countries host dozens of high-profile visits annually. But critics and royal watchers have noticed a pattern that seems to repeat itself. Whenever Harry and Meghan announce a project, initiative or appearance somewhere in the world, something strangely similar sometimes appears in the news shortly afterward involving other members of the royal family. Whether that's coincidence, timing, or simply the result of media amplification is still up for debate. But once the public starts noticing patterns, those patterns quickly become part of the conversation. Before diving deeper into speculation, though, it's important to remember something that often gets lost in the noise. Meghan was deeply involved in humanitarian work long before she ever met Harry. Long before becoming the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan travelled internationally to advocate for women's rights, clean water initiatives, and educational opportunities for girls. She worked with global organisations and visited communities in developing regions to highlight issues affecting women and children. Those efforts were documented years before she entered royal life. So when critics claim her humanitarian work only exists for publicity, that argument tends to fall apart pretty quickly once people start looking at the timeline. What makes the Sussex approach particularly fascinating now is that it exists outside the traditional palace structure. Without the rigid protocols of royal schedules and ceremonial obligations, Harry and Meghan have built a style of public engagement that focuses heavily on direct partnerships with organisations and community leaders. That model is often centred around initiatives connected to the Archewell Foundation, which supports projects involving mental health advocacy, digital responsibility and community development. Instead of standing on palace balconies waving to crowds, their visits often involve sitting down with volunteers, listening to stories from community leaders, and highlighting causes that might otherwise struggle to gain international attention. Now, imagine the scene if this Australian visit takes place. Harry and Meghan arrive, they meet with charities, they speak with volunteers working on the ground, and they bring cameras and global attention to local causes. Crowds gather, conversations begin, and headlines start spreading across international media. And somewhere in a palace office, you can almost imagine someone whispering, "We need something too." Of course, that part is speculation from commentators. But the perception itself tells us something important about the modern royal narrative. Because once the public begins connecting dots, those connections take on a life of their own. If there's one thing the British media enjoys more than royal ceremonies, it's comparing different members of the royal family. And for years, comparisons between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal household have fueled endless debates. On one hand, some tabloids portray Harry and Meghan as attention seekers or troublemakers. On the other hand, those same outlets publish article after article about them every single day. At a certain point, the contradiction becomes difficult to ignore. Calling someone irrelevant while dedicating enormous amounts of coverage to them is a bit like insisting you're not hungry while finishing an entire pizza. The logic simply doesn't add up. But let's look at another claim that occasionally surfaces in royal discussions. Some commentators believe palace insiders often remain aware of Harry and Meghan's upcoming engagements, even though the Sussexes now operate independently. Major international visits frequently involve coordination with local governments, non-profit groups, and security services, which means certain details naturally circulate before announcements become public. In other words, information sometimes travels. That doesn't necessarily mean there's strategic copying happening behind the scenes, but it does help explain how similar announcements occasionally appear within the same news cycle. And when that happens, the internet does what the internet does best. It starts connecting dots. Sometimes those dots form accurate conclusions. Other times they form narratives that spread faster than gossip at a palace garden party. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan continue building their own model of modern public service. Their focus on partnerships through Archewell allows them to collaborate with organisations working on everything from mental health awareness to online safety and community resilience. Whether critics approve or not, the model has proven extremely effective at drawing global attention to issues that might otherwise remain underreported. And attention matters. In the world of charity and humanitarian work, visibility can mean the difference between a struggling organisation and one that suddenly receives international support. Which brings us to the media reaction. Whenever Harry and Meghan participate in humanitarian visits, some critics immediately question their motives. The accusations usually follow a familiar script. They're doing it for publicity, they're seeking attention, or they're trying to compete with other royals. But here's the reality. Public figures doing charity work almost always do it publicly. That's how awareness spreads. If a charity visit happened quietly without any coverage, the cause itself would receive little attention. Criticizing humanitarian work for attracting publicity is a bit like criticizing firefighters for using water. It's literally part of the process. Another major factor shaping this conversation is the long-standing tension between palace narratives and Harry's own perspective. In interviews and in his memoir Spare, Harry spoke openly about moments when public statements were released in his name that he felt did not represent his views. Those experiences contributed to the frustration that eventually led him and Meghan to step away from official royal roles. Whether people agree with that decision or not, the outcome is undeniable. The Sussexes created a new path outside the royal system, and that path has kept them firmly in the global spotlight. Their projects continue trending worldwide. Their interviews spark debates across media platforms. Their appearances still draw large crowds and enormous online discussion. Ironically, the constant criticism directed toward them has often amplified their visibility rather than diminishing it. In fact, you could argue that the outrage has sometimes functioned as free advertising. The louder critics shout, the more people become curious about what Harry and Meghan are doing next. And somewhere out there, a Sussex supporter is probably sipping tea and saying, "Well, thanks for the promotion." As we wait to see whether these rumoured Australian visits actually materialise, one thing is certain. The conversation surrounding Harry and Meghan is far from over. Their influence remains strong, their work continues, and public fascination with their story shows no sign of fading. Another fascinating aspect of this global conversation is how predictable the reaction cycle has become. At this point, you could almost set your watch by it. First comes the announcement. Harry and Meghan are launching something new, visiting somewhere, or highlighting a cause. Then comes the wave of headlines and speculation. Social media lights up with debates, commentary, and reactions. Finally, the comparison game begins. Who did it first? Who did it better? Who's copying who? It sometimes feels less like a serious political conversation and more like a schoolyard argument, except instead of backpacks and lunchboxes, the discussion involves international tours and global charities. Yet the reason these debates continue is simple. Influence cannot be manufactured overnight. It has to be earned over time. And whether critics like it or not, Harry and Meghan have built a level of global cultural influence that many institutions spend decades trying to achieve. When they speak about mental health, people listen. When they highlight a charity, donations often increase. When they visit a community project, cameras appear, and suddenly millions of people around the world learn about that organisation. That kind of attention doesn't happen by accident. It comes from credibility, relatability, and the willingness to engage directly with issues that affect everyday people. Which may explain why every time the Sussexes plan a visit somewhere, the conversation becomes so intense. Because their presence doesn't just create headlines, it creates momentum. And in today's media environment, where attention is one of the most valuable currencies in the world, momentum is something many others would love to have. So whether the upcoming months bring one Australian visit or two, one thing is clear. The story of Harry and Meghan continues to unfold, and the world is still watching closely. If you enjoy thoughtful discussions like this, exploring the stories and dynamics surrounding Harry and Meghan, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future deep dives. And if you'd like to support the channel and help keep these conversations going, you can also use the Super Thanks feature right here on YouTube. Every bit of support helps this platform continue growing and bringing you more analysis, more commentary, and of course, a little humour along the way. Thanks for watching, thanks for supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the next episode.